It's the third night in a row. You finally started the medication that was supposed to calm everything down. Instead, your chest is tighter, your mind is louder, and you're lying there at 2 a.m. thinking, what is wrong with me? Now, this is not your fault. For a lot of people, Prozac makes anxiety worse before it makes it better. And there is a specific, well-documented reason why it happens. If you started fluoxetine, that's the generic name for Prozac, and felt more anxious, more wired, more on edge in those first couple of weeks, you're not broken. Your nervous system did something completely predictable. The problem is that almost nobody explains it to you before you take the first pill. I'm Dr. Air, quadruple board certified psychiatrist, and I've watched this exact moment send many people running from a medication that might have actually helped them. So in the next few minutes, I'll show you 3 things. 1, why a drug that raises serotonin can make you feel more anxious at first. 2, what is actually happening inside your brain during those rough early weeks. And 3, when and how it usually turns the corner and you begin to feel better. This last part is the one I wish every anxious patient knew earlier on. Let me tell you about a patient. I'll call her Renee, 51 years old, sharp, capable, the one who holds her whole family together, but quietly falling apart with severe anxiety. Her doctor started her on Prozac, a reasonable choice. Within 4 days, however, she felt worse. That was when she came to see me, jittery, heart pounding, awake until 3 a.m. with her thoughts spinning. She called the doctor's office, certain she was one of those people medication just doesn't work on. By day 5, she was ready to quit. Here's the part most doctors never explain to someone like Renee. When you take fluoxetine, serotonin levels in your brain increase quickly, within hours. But feeling better was never about serotonin simply going up. It's about your brain slowly adjusting to the new level. And that adjustment takes weeks. This is because even though serotonin increases within hours in the space between the brain cells, serotonin signaling is a gradual process that takes several weeks. A 2022 review in JAMA, a renowned journal, described this in detail. With these medications, side effects tend to appear before the benefits. So early on, you pay the full price with no rewards initially. And here's the cruel twist. Some of those early effects, the jitteriness, the pounding heart, the restlessness, look and feel exactly like anxiety itself. Some doctors call it jitteriness syndrome, and it most often shows up in the first 1 to 4 weeks. Studies show that about 15% of people on fluoxetine report anxiety, nervousness, or difficulty sleeping. Anxiety was one of the top reasons people stopped the medication early. This is an irony because even though it is used to treat depression and anxiety, it can initially make anxiety worse. Here is why that matters so much. The first few weeks are exactly when people decide whether to keep taking their medication. So the ones most likely to quit are often the ones who developed side effects. They walked away convinced nothing will ever work, when the truth is, they stopped a couple of weeks before the turn. But here is where it gets strange. Your serotonin brain cells come with their own brake pedal, tiny sensors called 5-HT1A autoreceptors. Picture a thermostat in your brain that regulates how much serotonin is available. When the medication suddenly floods the system, that thermostat overreacts. It decides there is far too much, slams on the brake, and tells your neurons to fire less. So in the very beginning, the drug can actually quiet serotonin in the places that matter most, the exact opposite of what you were hoping for. It is only after about 4 weeks, when that thermostat stops overreacting and settles down, that serotonin finally flows the way the medication intended. That recalibration is the real turning point, not the pill, the adjustment. And this next piece is the one that surprises my patients the most. Researchers gave a single dose of fluoxetine to rats, then watched their fear center, a deep almond-shaped region called the amygdala. Think of it as the smoke alarm of the brain. That one dose made those fear neurons more excitable and the animals more anxious, not less. Now, that is an animal study, so I won't oversell it, but it lines up almost perfectly with what people report and what the label already documents. For a short window, the very part of your brain that runs fear can get louder before the medication finally turns it down. That is the wired, on edge feeling so many of you describe in those first days. Now, this is the part I wish Renee had known on day one. It does improve, and we can be specific about when. A 2017 analysis found something reassuring. It is mostly the physical, body level anxiety, the jitters, the racing heart that spike early. The deeper mental kind of anxiety often begins easing from the very first week. And the landmark fluoxetine study found that more than half of the people who eventually improved had already started turning the corner by week 2, more than 3/4 by week 4. So that window of feeling worse is usually measured in days to a few weeks, not forever. Renee did not quit on day 5. We talked through exactly what you just heard. She held on with some support through the hardest stretch. By week 3, the 3 a.m. wake-ups started to loosen their grip. By week 6, she told me the volume in her head had finally subsided. The medication did not betray her. It just had a brutal initiation that nobody had warned her about. And that gap between what she expected and what she got is the deeper wound here. When Prozac arrived back in 1987, it was sold as something close to a miracle. One famous psychiatrist wrote about patients who became better than well. Magazine covers treated it like a happiness switch you could flip. So when the real thing makes you feel worse first, the distance between that glossy promise and your 2 a.m. reality feels like proof that you are the broken one. You are not. You were handed the marketing instead of the mechanism. For some people, those early weeks truly are too hard, or the medication is simply the wrong fit. That is information to share with your prescriber, not a personal failing. And if you have carried an overloaded nervous system for years, no single pill was ever going to undo all of that by itself in a few weeks. But hear this clearly. You're not someone who cannot handle medication. You're someone with a highly responsive nervous system that reacts exactly as an overloaded system does to a sudden change. And that same sensitivity, the thing that made the start feel so loud, is the very thing that lets your brain recalibrate once you give it the time. Medication is one tool. It works best when the whole system around it, your stress load, your sleep, your physiology, is being treated at the same time. That is the approach I walk people through in the Nervous System Reset. The link is in the description below. Now, here's something fascinating about this medication. Every SSRI has what's called a half-life. That's simply how long it takes your body to clear half the dose. For most of them, it takes about 24 hours, meaning it takes 4 to 7 days for the medication to completely clear from the body. Prozac, however, is the exception. Between the drug itself and the long-lasting component it breaks down into, it can linger in your system for weeks after your final pill. So instead of dropping off a cliff, it fades out slowly. It almost tapers itself. This is why coming off Prozac is rarely as rough as it is with other SSRIs. But that raises an obvious question. If the half-life is what makes stopping easy or brutal, then what about the most prescribed SSRI of them all, Zoloft? Zoloft leaves your body in a fraction of the time it takes Prozac to do so. And that one difference significantly changes how it feels to stop it. To find out more about Zoloft, check out the next video.